My name is Zachary McNaughton, and I am not a professional angler. I've been fishing for over 20 years, and the one thing that these years have taught me most is that I have a lot to learn. So let's meet some of Vermont's true master anglers, and together we'll discover some fishing techniques and explore the many species that this great state has to offer. During this episode, we'll learn how to replace a broken rod guide with Jim White.
What we're going to do today is look at the techniques and the tools required to do a guide repair. I've chosen a older type bait casting rod with older style guides for just a demonstration purpose, where we're going to remove the old guide and put on a series of new guides. One of the things to look at is the different types of guides that are available, and there's a wide variety, and it's important to try to understand the technique for the guide as to what its purpose is. Where you've got a single-footed guide, and that would be for a spinning rod. This is probably the most common guide that people break on a spinning rod because it's the biggest. This is a double-footed guide, basically used for bait casting. And the thing that I want to show here is some of the different colors that are available, where you have a chrome, then you have a gunsmoke, and you have a black. These are all guides that have come off of older or existing rods. So you can see that some of them still have glue in the bottom, but much of what I do is to repurpose broken rod components onto new rods. Sizes is remarkably complex to follow. There's a guide that you can use here where you can pick out the different ring sizes that are available. And it gives you also a guide here for what size tip tops are used based on the end of the diameter of the rod. What we're going to do is put on these 4 guides. I've got single-footed guides all in chrome to match the other ones that I've already put on. This is an interesting one. This would be called a micro guide. And you better be of keen eyesight and very patient to put them on, because they're so small, they're very difficult to do. That just goes some of the different sizes involved with all the guides. I've already removed these 2 guides over here and placed the replacement guides on temporarily with tape. So we come now to one of the existing rod or guides. You can see it's a little bent up. But the first thing we have to do is take that off. And that's best done with a single-edged razor blade. And I always cut towards the guide, starting on top of where I know the foot of the guide is. And I don't want to cut to the reel seat side, because if I slip or anything, I could dig into the rod. And once you put a stress riser on the rod diameter, you can generally break it. So we don't want to do that. So we're just going to cut. I'm pushing quite hard to cut through the old urethane, the old thread. My goal is to expose as much of the foot of the old guide as I can. That's probably enough. And then I can just pry it right out. So I've got the old guide out. Now the hard part now is to get all of this thread and urethane off. So I'm just going to put my fingernail underneath it and peel that right off. Continue to do that, hoping to expose the end of the thread. There we go. There's the thread. Now I'm just going to continue to pull that thread out from underneath the urethane. So I'm spinning the rod with one hand and just pulling the thread out from underneath. So there's all the thread that was on the guide. And I'm just able to chip the rest of it away. And that's pretty much good to go. I'm just going to check it with a razor blade for any little spots that might be stuck on there. I'm going to worry about that mark there because that's paint. So the next step will be to select the proper guide. And you have to be careful because they're different sizes. So I'm going to take the biggest one, and I have to make sure that the end of the guide is prepared to be put on. And that means that it has to be filed on the end. Because these guides came off a different rod, it's already filed. But to show you what we would do, we would take this file and just, what we're doing is beveling that end there. So now we got to place the guide on the rod. To do that, we need some masking tape. And this is super thin, obviously. You buy it specifically to build rods, but I even cut it in half again because the guides are quite small. So we figure out whereabouts we want the guide. So I put all the guides facing up off of the reel seat. Remember where the old one was. It was right here. Straight up and down. And that should be all we need to do to hold that guide in place so we can start our windings. We have to use thread now, and I buy this thread through the rod building supply house, and this is a relatively small diameter B size, and it's already got the color preservative in it, so that once we urethane, the color stays the same. Almost everything you do is in black until you do a custom rod. But this thimble allows you to, once you start wrapping, if you need it to stop to do something, you just release it and it holds it without unspooling and provides a little tension on the rod. So I do 3, 4 wraps. Now I need to slide it down to about 1/8 of an inch from the beginning of the foot. So I work it on down like this. And I like where it's at. Okay, so they're all parallel to each other. Now I'm jumping over them with the first wrap. I'm going to do a couple of wraps to begin with. Okay, now I'm going to cut the tag end off. I don't care where that tag end is because it's all going to be underneath all of the wrappings that I've got. So now I just continue to spin the rod, and all I'm doing is just guiding the line with my other hand. And I'm trying to get them as close to them as I can, to the neighboring wrap. And you can see it's already started to climb to the beginning of the foot. So I just keep on going. This is where I need the magnifying glass the most, so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm halfway up the foot, so I don't really need the tape anymore. I'm going to get the tape out of my way. Then I'm going to look at what I've done, and you can see, if you look very closely, you can see that I have a little bit of gap between all of my wraps. That's what this tool does. It allows me to go along the edge of it. And I'm just going to push them back together so they're nice and tight to each other. You didn't have to push very hard, but it just gets everything nice and cozy next to each other. So now I'm pretty much about an 1/8 of an inch, quarter, 3/16 of an inch away from completing. Now I have to prepare for ending the wrap. It means that I need to take this loop of, this is 20-pound braid, and I tuck it underneath, and I just leave it like that. And I wind it right in. And you want to get minimum of 5, maybe 10 wraps on top of it. Okay, so I've started to hit the curvature of the guide. So I believe I've gone far enough. And that wrap is complete. So now comes, so I pinch my finger so that it won't unwrap. Take my razor, cut the line. Now I need to tuck that inside the loop. I grab the tag end here, or the round end of the braid, and just pull it on down and underneath. So that's complete. I can take my tool, take things up a bit, the final step will be to cut the tag, sharp razor blade, is done. The last process to complete the rod is urethane, and I have 3 rods set up here because I have 3 rod turners, and I've acquired these over the years from a homemade one to one that was given to me. Actually, both of these were given to me. This is probably where the average fisherman does not have this equipment, and so my recommendation to you would be to put on several very light coats of urethane, because you wouldn't have the luxury of a rod turner. But for me, because I have 3, I generally like to set up all 3 so that you can get a decent mix of urethane of equal parts of the hardener and the catalyst, so that you can work it from the far rod to the near rod. And all I'm going to do is put on a coat and then go to the next rod, and then tomorrow I'll be able to put on the final coat. Generally it's 2 coats on bass type spinning rods and bait casters. So as you can see, it's just turning it nice and slowly and evenly. Well, the purpose of the urethane is to lock the guide itself to the blank, and then lock the thread to the guide, so everything is locked in nice and tight. It'll soak into the thread. Even though it may look like it's thick enough now, once it dries, it won't be that thick. This is a hook keeper. The process of mounting a hook keeper is identical to mounting all of the guides on the rod. So the wrapping process is the same. and the treatment using urethane is identical from one to the other. So just because I'm not doing a guide here, but a rod keeper, it is the same thought process going through. You're going to need 2 to maybe 3 coats, and I'm never in a hurry on dry time, so I generally will urethane at the end of the day and then just let it dry overnight and then repeat the following day. My guess is probably a 5-hour dry time. Okay, that will just work its way around the rod and even itself out. Slobber it on for the time being, and then I'll even it out. So I go past the thread a little bit onto the blank, and the first coat is really the most important because it's more about getting it saturated into the thread than it is to get the profile. Because the second time around, you can see you can get a nice curvature to the urethane. That one you get on the second coat. The epoxy is a high build epoxy, so you can put on quite a bit and it will, through the turner, work its way down to a nice curvature. But for guys that don't have a turner, I would go with the lightest coat as you can and just do it maybe 3 or 4 times until you get it built up and protected properly, because you should not be able to see the thread visually poking through the urethane when it's complete.
Thanks for watching this episode of Vermont Master Anglers. For more content, visit our Facebook page at Vermont Master Anglers. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe.